When Robert Oppenheimer witnessed the very first nuclear detonation in 1945, he famously said, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." It is one of the most frequently repeated quotes in history, and most people interpret it in a pretty straightforward manner. These were the words of a man who regretted what he had created. But if you examine the quote in more detail, it becomes clear that there is something else going on here. Oppenheimer didn't actually come up with those words himself. He was quoting something else, something ancient. These were the words of the Bhagavad Gita, a piece of Hindu literature that speaks of massive wars between the gods. When Oppenheimer was asked whether he had detonated the first atomic bomb in history, he answered, "Yes, in modern times." So what was Oppenheimer implying? Was he saying that humans had detonated nuclear weapons in the distant past? If this wild theory is true, then where is the evidence for these wars? Let's find out.
51 million people entering another
surveillance camera capturing the
unidentified flying object.
lockdowns and mass testing.
Today, that the world is going to end.
The Bhagavad Gita is the most famous Hindu text in the world, and it dates back to about 3,000 years ago. Some believe it is actually much older, and point out that the 700-verse poem could have been spread through oral tradition before it was actually written down. One of the most incredible things about this piece of literature is that people are trained to recite it in a rhythmic manner purely by memory. But why were people taught to memorize the Vedic texts in this manner? What if this oral tradition was started by survivors of a terrible cataclysm? What if the only way to ensure this knowledge survived was to memorize it, rather than writing it down in a book that could be lost or destroyed? The Bhagavad Gita does indeed speak of a world-shattering event that almost wipes out humanity. Specifically, it speaks of wars on a planetary or even galactic scale, fueled by superweapons known as Astra. These weapons were clearly explosive in nature, as one verse implies that Astra were capable of causing crowds of warriors with steeds and elephants and weapons to be carried away as if they were dry leaves of trees. The Bhagavad Gita also speaks of giant plumes of smoke that seem suspiciously similar to mushroom clouds. But it gets even crazier. Another line speaks of a master weapon called the Brahmastra, which is described as a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes an entire race. There was neither a counterattack or a defense that could stop it. When the weapon was detonated, it created, quote, incandescent columns of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns that rose in all its splendor. After, corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. Their hair and nails fell out. Pottery broke without any apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. Any target hit by the Brahmastra would be utterly destroyed. Land would become barren and lifeless. Rainfall would cease. And infertility in humans and animals would follow for eons of time. The writers of this Vedic text are clearly describing nuclear fallout and radiation poisoning. These lines speak of a weapon charged with the power of the universe, containing the radiance of 10,000 suns. This is exactly how we would describe the atom bomb today. Not only is a nuclear blast brighter than the sun, but it also creates more heat, at least for a brief moment during detonation. In the world of paranormal research, Zecharia Sitchin holds a special place. Before his passing in 2010, he brought forward a number of incredible ideas based on his analysis of ancient Sumerian writings. One of his most outlandish theories was that humanity had once been caught in the middle of an ancient galactic war. He states that this war was fought between extraterrestrials and that our planet was bombarded with nuclear weapons in the crossfire. Sitchin points to the famous Lament of Ur, a Sumerian text that speaks of the complete destruction of a major ancient city. The great storm of heaven, the ever-roaring storm, the malicious storm which swept over the land, the storm which destroyed cities, the storm which destroyed houses, the storm which destroyed cow pens, the storm which burned sheepfolds, which laid hands on the holy rites, which defiled the weighty council, the storm which cut off all that is good from the land. Sitchin believes that this great storm or evil wind was a nuclear blast wave followed by intense radiation and fallout. The aftermath of the explosion is devastating, and the Sumerian text describes a horrific scene. The walls were gaping, the high gates, the roads were piled with dead. In the side streets where feasting crows would gather, scattered they lay. In all the side streets and roadways bodies lay. In the open fields that used to fill with dancers, they lay in heaps. Some believe that Sodom and Gomorrah were also destroyed with nuclear weapons, and that a spaceport near the Giza Plateau was targeted in this war. The Bible states that when Abraham looked at the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah from afar, he saw smoke rising from the earth as the smoke of a furnace. So what if there was physical evidence for nuclear detonations on our planet in ancient times? As it turns out, there are mysterious pieces of glass found throughout Egypt and Iraq that seem to have been created by nuclear detonations. These pieces of glass are often found by archaeologists when they dig up ancient Sumerian sites. The exact same pieces of glass were found by Oppenheimer's team after the Trinity test in 1945, and scientists even named this strange material Trinitite. Trinitite only forms if silica sand is exposed to temperatures of more than 1700 degrees centigrade. The Egyptians and other ancient people revered this glass and used it to make jewelry, stone tools, and other items. Of course, mainstream scientists claim that the material was caused by lightning or meteor strikes, but here's the problem. Meteors tend to create tiny beads of glass rather than the large fragments that we see in the Middle East. Lightning, on the other hand, creates a phenomenon known as strike tunneling that is equally distinct. And if this glass was caused by a meteor, then where's the impact crater? Keep in mind that the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were detonated above the ground with a technique that minimizes craters, and ancient nuclear weapons could have been used in a similar manner. But this isn't the only evidence of an ancient nuclear war. In 2019, scientists discovered a layer of extremely radioactive material close to Jodhpur. For decades, residents of the area had suffered from high rates of cancer and birth defects, to the point where people are no longer allowed to live there. The ancient radioactive layer of ash beneath their feet explains these health issues, and if current levels of radiation are still deadly in that area, the nuclear fallout must have been insanely lethal thousands of years ago. Many sites in ancient Egypt also exhibit strangely high levels of radiation. Mainstream researchers say that this is due to the decaying uranium in stone monuments, but others claim that this too is evidence of an ancient nuclear war. There is also a long-standing rumor that extremely radioactive skeletons were found in the ruins of the Harappan civilization, although these claims have never been confirmed. For those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. At the end of the day, we'll never know for sure whether our ancestors had access to nuclear weapons. The only thing we can do is avoid destroying ourselves with similar technology in the modern era. If we fail, archaeologists thousands of years from now may one day dig up the ruins of our cities and wonder what caused them to come crumbling down. Who knows? Maybe this has all happened before, and perhaps it will happen again.